The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with James. James is going to tell us where and when he was born, and then he's going to describe to us what it was like where he grew up, the schools he went to, and the education that he received. So, James, come into the compound.
Thanks, Tim. I can't wait. Apparently, the backdrop,
welcome.
Afghanistan. You were sharing a bit of your story, and I was just honored to hear it. So thanks for sharing. I love that.
Brilliant. No worries. Right. So, when and where were you born?
I was born in 1976 in Altona, Manitoba, Canada. So Manitoba as a province is directly north of North Dakota. So it's central Canada. Small little community of about, at the time, I think roughly 4,000 or 5,000 people. And it's a farming community.
Is that like north of the Black Hills?
That's an interesting question. Yes, that would be true.
Yeah, the Black Hills of Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
There's a song about that.
I didn't know this. Perhaps you want to sing it.
How's it go? In the Black Hills of Dakota. And that's about all I know of it. Sorry.
I have never been there, but all I can say is I had an experience of the Black Hills this morning, and it came through you, so that was nice.
There you go. I don't mind making a fool of myself. So you didn't know I could sing, did you?
You know what?
Still don't.
Yeah, there you go. And you know, and I have tried my bagpipes at singing. And the last time, my wife apparently thought I was a pretty good singer, and then she asked me to sing the song, and I forget which song. I tried noodling through, and she looked at me and she just starts laughing. So I'm not sure what that means.
Brilliant. So, middle of Canada then.
Yeah.
So what was the weather like there during your typical year? Do you get a lot of snow, or is it is it a mountainous area?
Yeah,
farming area?
Farming, so flat, so prairies, very flat. And I met a lady from China the other day, and she figured she loved going on road trips, traveling through the prairies. And I said, and prairies ends up being begins in Alberta, part of, and then it goes to Saskatchewan. It's just flat, and the Manitoba is just flat. Towards the eastern edge of Manitoba, you start getting into a little more waves and some lakes and stuff like that. But primarily, the entire province, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, it's just flat. So this lady I met from China was saying she likes driving through the prairies because, unlike where she lives in China, you can take your vehicle, put it on a road, and just point it in one direction, and you see nothing for it's just straight, and it's just fields everywhere. And she goes, it's the only place I've ever traveled where the road is straight for like 3 days. There's no bend. It just goes straight. So there's nothing to go around. It's just fields and fields, open. So Manitoba, so where I lived, there's a lot of, like I say, farming. So potato farming, grain farming. And these communities that were quite industrious. And so the communities that I come from, there's a large contingent of Mennonite people. So not Amish people. It's very, very different. But Mennonites. So Mennonites were, a lot of them originally came from Germany and Russia, and then they traveled through different places. And so basically some would say the faith tradition, but it's the way that they do life. And so they're very industrious and hardworking, work with their hands. So I found myself there. So yeah, it was interesting. And so my dad was a farmer, and I remember I wanted to become a farmer, but I developed these seasonal allergies, and so that wasn't possible for me. So now we live on the West Coast in Vancouver.
Ah.
Yeah.
So excellent. So schooling. What was your schooling like? Did you go to a little tiny sort of one-room schoolhouse with a little old schoolma'am and all the kids from the farms around, or was it a little bit slightly bigger than that?
Yeah, so we lived in the country, and at the time they had an annexed off where if you lived in the country, you'd go to a country school. And so it used to be from grades 1 through 12, you would be in a small school, and basically you'd be in a classroom full of kids that were from ages, age 5, 6, grade 1 to grade 12, all in one class. So the teacher would teach everyone. But however, when I entered school, then this school had 3 classrooms, actually 2. And the first classroom was from grade 1 to 3. So one teacher for 3 grades, and there was roughly 30, 35 children in that class, and from 4 to 6 in another class. And actually, correction, there was 3 when I began. And that school was called New Hope School. So it was a small little school. It was a newer building, but in the country, and it housed the country children. And the third class was from grade 6 to 8. And I remember the fear always was after you move from grade 8, you would go to high school, which is town school. And so I remember thinking in grade 1, I had about 7 years before I had to face the real fear. And what's interesting is they ended up changing and saying that, and all of a sudden they took grade 7 and 8 away. That classroom is no more, meaning they said, you'll actually be going to junior high, which is grade 7 and 8. You'll be doing that in town school. So I remember thinking, oh my Lord, I'm going to be faced with the dangerous town city folk when I'm in grade 6. And so that was my experience. And I had some really interesting friends. And what was interesting is my parents, when I was a child, they never let me play sports, like organized sports, even though the high school or the teacher, the elementary teacher, would often call my parents to say, he's good at this, could he play? And I was never allowed to play. My parents held their faith tradition pretty religiously, and so they were always feeling like if I play sport, maybe then it would take away from Sunday worship. So, and I get where they're coming from. It makes sense to me. And not to say I live like that anymore, but to be totally honest, for us, the friends that I had in school, I had a few, like I say, really good people. But they did play organized sport. And so I always did feel like someday when we went to town school, I wonder if these people would be friends of mine. And actually, when we went to town school in grade 7, some of them just moved on, and it was sad for me. So, but to be honest, I really enjoyed those first few years of my school life. I did have an experience though. I didn't go to kindergarten, and my first grade teacher her name is Mrs. Funk. And Mrs. Funk on was it day 1 or day 2 of grade 1, asked questions and then said, James, would you like to answer? And I answered, and then whatever answer I gave, it seemed like it wasn't good enough. And she says to me, you see, children, this is what happens when you don't go to kindergarten. And I just sat there and thought, oh my goodness, what is she doing? I felt about this big.
Oh dear. So yeah, I guess that could possibly have a detrimental effect to your schooling for the rest of your life.
It kind of
scarred.
scarred
for life.
It's kind of scarred for life. But what's interesting is I also had a stutter, and I think what she said didn't make it any better. So I wasn't sure what she's saying is me as a person wasn't enough, or how I talked wasn't enough. There were so many different plays. Let's just say my first or second day of school, it did kind of create these issues, right? And I did feel like a bit of a wounded duck right from the beginning. So yeah.
So that was your initial baptism of fire into first grade then.
Oh, straight on. And you know what, honestly, that lady, I mean, holy smokes, I'll never forget, I was in grade 3, and that was my last year in her class, and I was thinking I couldn't wait to get out. But then when I went to grade 4, and I was in Mr. Fast's class, so that of course was with the grade 4, 5, and 6, I felt so free of being free of Mrs. Funk. The only thing is, I could hear her biting into her apple because the classroom was attached to the next class. And that apple bite always reminded me, because she ate an apple the same day she put me to shame. So I'm like, whenever I hear an apple bite, I think of Mrs. Funk. And actually, she passed away a couple of years ago. And when she passed away, I remember I had to kind of like let go of some demons because there's still stuff circulating there.
Oh, brilliant. So what happened when you moved up to junior high then? Did you have a big mate that looked after you, or did all the big kids in the big town school pick on you because you was a country bumpkin?
Yeah, that was a great question, Tim. So like I was saying, I entered grade 7, so that was town school, and um, I took my speech impediment with me, and I just stammered through a lot of my words. And I'll never forget in grade 8, my mom had set up to have a speech therapist come see me. I didn't know it. I was sitting in my class, and all of a sudden I hear over the loudspeaker, James, come to the principal's office. And I thought, well, I don't know what I did, but I went, and he said, here's this lady, and she'd like to have a little meeting with you. And I sat down and talked with her. And I realized very quickly she was here to help me with my speech. And I thought, well, this would have been helpful years ago, but it's certainly helpful now. And what's interesting is she listened to me for a while, and she said, James, you actually don't have a stutter at all. And I remember stopping her saying, well, what do you mean? Like, I was pretty proficiently and keenly aware of how I felt, the way I talked and how I talked. And she said, you just think so fast. Your tongue literally cannot wrap around the words as fast as you're thinking. That's all that it is. And so you're going to have to retrain your brain how to think and how you speak. And what's interesting, so I use this story, I tee it up with this. There were some boys that, and I forget, I think I was midway through grade 8, and they were kind of hassling me. So to your point of being bullied, never really had the issue other than these kids, they were saying things, and I think it was about how I was speaking, if I remember correctly. But needless to say, they were really being rough on me. Like, they weren't wrestling with me, but they were really poking hard. And poking, I can stand to poke, like, fair enough. But it was poked pretty hard. And I'll never forget, there was a guy in school that I really respected. His name is Ken Weeb. And he was one of the more popular kids in school, but I really appreciated him because he had this deep, how would I say it? Though he was popular and though he was involved in a lot of sport, but he seemed like he had a big heart. I remember people, they really appreciated him, but not just for the jockiness that he brought. He actually brought the certain value of character. And I couldn't put my finger on it other than I'll never forget the day when I was getting kind of bullied around. And I didn't know he was close, and he wasn't a friend of mine because I didn't really know him. Weren't in the same circles. And all of a sudden, I heard him and his friends walk by. They were several yards away, but he must have overheard what was going on. And he walked. I remember seeing his group. They turned around and they walked towards where we were. And he said, "Leave him alone." And I'll never forget. I get emotional thinking about that because it just made me go, "Holy smokes! This guy doesn't know me. But this guy's got a heart, and he's using his power for strength." And it made me go. And honestly, the kids that were bullying me, they backed off so quickly. And Ken had some pretty big guys around him too, and some pretty tough guys. And these guys can mess around with these kids pretty quickly. And that to me was so special, to be honest. And the funny story is this: several years later, I was in high school, and you know how it is. You're looking for people to date. Apparently, you're looking for who you can pick to date. And Ken's sister was maybe 2 or 3 years younger than me. I didn't really know much about her, but I realized at that age, and I didn't go to the same high school as him. And I'll mention this later. I went to a private high school, but I realized he had a younger sister, and I asked her out on a date, and I wasn't that interested in her, but I was trying to get to him. So I'll never forget that day when Ken said, "Leave him alone. Leave him alone." And those kids just turned and walked away. It actually just made me go, "Holy smokes." And it was lovely.
He clearly knew right from wrong then. And obviously, understood what was going on. And these other Irks must have been doing it to other people. So, fair play to him.
True.
So you managed junior high then, and you got away without being bullied too much. How was your speech coming on? Did that work? Did you manage to slow your mind down to catch up with your mouth?
It's such a, I love that. Thanks, Tim. Remember those words that she gave me, that speech therapist? It really pierced me because I thought there's something I can do about this. And I was all eager and passionate about doing something. And I had tried through blame. You know how it is. You shame yourself. You try to help yourself cross the finish line. Like, there's something wrong with me, and perhaps if I just accept there's something wrong with me. And so I tried all those techniques prior to, but now she brought the good news. But they shocked me, and it's like I get to do something about it. And like, how do I do this? And she says, your thinking is so fast. And so, of course, what do you do when you've created a construct of a healthy appreciation that you might be a problem? Now you're thinking that the speed of your talking is a problem, or your speed of your thinking is a problem. And so I addressed so now, like you say, transitioning to high school, typically when they'd ask for who'd want to volunteer to come speak in front of the class, like I'd be the last to raise my hand. As soon as it's time for group work, I would just like shy away. And my social life really struggled. And I was honestly, I'll be frank, I was depressed for most of my high school years, because just trying to keep myself small, and yet there was something that wanted just to come out. Like I love to be. And constantly telling myself, James, and of course, the language on and how I saw the speed of my thinking and how it translated into the speed of my talking, it came from the perspective of that I'm still the problem. So I tried that on for about a year or maybe 2. And of course, it just made me feel less and less. And the people were lovely. Like my parents, they sent me to this private Christian school, and they really wanted to be there with me and to help me along with, and a lovely school, full of a lot of different kids. Like it wasn't just people who were of like staunch faith. The kids got sent if they were in trouble, if their parents realized, if they're from different parts of the country, or they'd send their kids here. And so I was with a large group of people. So there's definitely opportunities for bullies to poke. But what's fascinating, I think what I did is I made myself not seen to the point where bullies wouldn't poke. And so I realized that I think my speaking is doing a lot of it. Like, why give people something to bug? So why would I speak? So I did less and less and less of it. And again, as soon as a teacher would say anything like, now it's time for group work, just find a partner of 3. Oh my goodness. I would it was hell for me. It was the worst. I go to the bathroom. I'd be like trying to stay uninvolved. And it was crazy. And then if we do group presentation, I would find certain words that I could say clearly and say, well, I'll say that piece or something. And often it was where words started with R, and I forget what they were, but back then I remembered, I knew exactly which words would trigger me. And I would just go on and on and on about that. And I couldn't get through that word. And I would just stay I keep stumbling like, and then I couldn't get it out. And what's interesting is nobody actually in high school ever bugged me about it. If ever I did it, they never really said anything about it. And as far as I'm concerned, they held a lot of grace and space for me. But I couldn't let go of retraining my brain. And so I knew that there had to be something there. And then I'll never forget, was it in mid-grade 10 or maybe grade 11, probably grade 10, where I just really got about saying, listen, to keep blaming myself that I'm the problem because I speak like this, how about I look at this differently now? It's clearly not working, that I'm the problem. She gave me some good news. Why don't I keep it at good news? I can entrain my brain to slow down. But then I thought, what comes first, the slowing down of the brain or the speed of talk? And what I realized is I had to, and I think I realized this well later, but what I realized now I was entraining myself that when I was talking and feeling the inner judgment of you're not good enough and you should do it like this or like that I was slowing it down for myself and saying, my brain, though it's fast, I get to choose what I want to speak about with all of that's happening in here. And so I made a pivot, and I remember thinking, wow, this is very difficult work. I had to retrain how I spoke. I had to retrain that maybe certain words weren't a problem, like that started with R. And I spent much, let's say, until the completion of high school, like I had decided that people already knew me for this, and it was my identity. And so this was how it was going to stay until I exited. So of course my preoccupation came with just being done and getting out, just getting out. So grade 12, for example, I showed up for maybe a quarter of the classes. My constant excuse was there was farming work to be done. I had to go home and help, and though our farm wasn't that big. I don't know how I passed, to be honest, other than I think some teachers had sympathy on me. Just that I don't know if they realized I was just struggling. And but yeah, I'll share a story later about how somebody came along, the person that I currently live with, who's married to me, how she came along and how that whole stuttering problem just disappeared because she accepted it from a level. But yeah, when I think going back, and thanks for triggering me back to that spot, those were difficult years. And sometimes I think about those years. I have a son who's high functioning autistic, and he thinks so fast. I've never been tested for anything. I have worked on myself ferociously, though, to communicate and to take all of the nuance and the different paths and bunny trails to tie them together. I think I used to doubt that I had any ability to do that. And that's where a lot of this stammering came from. Like, what does this even mean? And so you know what I mean, right? So it just all created a hornet's nest.
So you managed to survive high school then. So when you graduated, I mean, clearly you didn't graduate with honours then.
No.
So, but did you have the prom? Did you manage to get enough to leave to graduate on time? Because as I understand it, if you don't pass all your tests and everything, you have to retake the year. Is that the way it works over there?
Yeah, that is how it works. Yeah. Got to retake the.
Yeah, so 12 becomes 13, but it's 12 again.
Well, and actually, you bring an interesting point. So I had missed so many classes math, and I was taking university entrance math, like the most difficult of maths. I didn't want to opt out, just in case. I don't know what I was thinking, but I never wanted to. I challenged myself, like even though the thought of school is just extending hell, like why would I do this? But I never wanted to cut myself short, so I always wanted to put my best foot forward. But to that point, I skipped so many classes in grade 11 and grade 12, most of my math classes. And of course, if you don't click into like a a math formula at the beginning, you're Jamie lost the whole year. And so my grades, to your point, brings up this memory. I needed to, in order for me to pass math so that I would not need to come back to school the next year. And I may just have had to do math again. I'm not sure how they'd work that. To be honest, but the thought of coming back for another year, oh my goodness, that was just too much. But anyway, for me to get my certificate and graduate, I mapped it out, and my math average was something like, was it 20 or 30% of the year? And I had to, in order for me to get a 50% balance, the exam was worth 50% of the year. Something like this. Forget the exact metrics, but it was highly steeped as far as the importance. And I did my math, and I had to score at minimum was an 85 or 90% of my math exam. Now keep in mind, I was failing every assignment, getting 10, 15, 35%, 25% average, 20 average, whatever it was.
Outrageous.
And yeah.
That's pressure.
It's pressure. So I came home studying for exams. I'd finished my other exams, and I had one exam left, final year. And it was the weekend, and I had some friends who, and some of these guys that I hung with, they like to ride dirt bike and four-wheelers and three-wheelers, and so they wanted to come to my place. And I said, listen, I got to study for my exam. And so I started studying Friday afternoon, and of course trying to wrap myself around how would I figure this out. And so looking back at homework and trying to stress test how the teacher marked it up and how he showed the formula, and going through the notes that I did have, which were very minimal, going through the textbook. And I struggled and frustrated, stayed up almost all night. And then I got up really early Saturday, and I stayed up till late again. And I remember thinking all of a sudden, just exhausted, putting my binder down on the bed going, honestly, I don't get any of this. Everything I've been doing since Friday till now, there's not a hope. If anything, I'm more confused than ever. And I thought I'll crack it one more day, Sunday. Tomorrow's the day. I have no idea, but tomorrow's the day, because I got the exam Monday morning, first thing. So I woke up in the morning. I think we went to church that day, whatever it ended up being. because that was a thing you did. You did not go to church, even if the church was the thing. You had food, but that was your spiritual food. So you go take that in, right? So I can appreciate that. And came back, and I remember I sat on my bed and thinking, here I sit. My whole schooling life in front of me, basically. All for what end? What the outcome of this, the score of this exam is going to determine. I thought I was done suffering, but apparently maybe not. We'll see. And what came to heart in that moment, I'll never forget, I took my notes, I turned them upside down, I took a new piece of paper, and I said, if I were to work with how my brain functions, how would I see this? How would I see these formulas? And I just started going on a rant, like with numbers. I just started penciling things and creating my own formula. How I understood it, how my brain worked. So here you go. I engaged in grade 10. Remember how I said I flipped the switch and I started thinking, how is this not bad news? How is it maybe something for good? And I started just leaning into how I saw things. And I created my formula and formulas. And what's interesting is I turned over my page and I stress tested it against the answer that the teacher has showed that he came up with. And on some of them, it was exactly the same. And I was like, whoa, my own formula for an entire math year, formulas for the entire. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, something's working here. In some areas it wasn't. So I went back and I looked at his thing, not saying I suck, but going, what is that? What is that? And then I turned the page over and then I stress tested and then I made some inference. I just listened to my brain and made some inference. And then I turned it back. And I did that until literally it took me almost, was it 2 or 3 hours? In 3 hours, I'm like, I get all of it. But I go, I get it through the way I do it. But if they're going to look at my work, they're going to have not a clue how I got there, because how I did this is not how they taught me. And I remember I remember Monday morning, go to school feeling so encouraged or feeling so completely devastated. Thinking either I'm going to ace this thing or get 0. If they mark me on how I got to the answer, it'll be a big fat 0, because this is not what they taught. I did my exam, and typically when I did math tests or any assignments, it take me a long time because remember, I missed all of these formulas. This exam was an hour and a half. I had my exam done in about half the amount of time, and I walked to the front of the class, handed on my exam, and my students or my friends looking at me going, I remember this. And even the teacher who was marking my math exam, he ended up sitting in that same class that other people were doing exams, and we happened to be in a large group with a bunch of exam writing. He looked at me and he's kind of like, And I remember thinking, well, I did my best. And I remember shaking, walking up and giving him the paper. And I gave it to him. And then I left. But I didn't clean out my locker. I didn't clean out my locker because I realized I might need it next year, even though I probably cleaned it out that year anyway. But I could come back that Friday if I wanted to clean out. So I went home. I came back Friday, and I ended up passing the math teacher in the hallway. And he looked at me and he stopped, and he had marked my exam by then, I guess already. He said to me, firstly, I have no idea how you got to your answers. But let me tell you something. Not only did you pass, and I forget the exact amount, but it was either 95, 97, 98, 99, or was it 100? I forget. I don't want to give myself that much slack, but it was so on point. And I remember going, miracle. That's all that happened.
So that's you graduated then?
I graduated, and I'm like, oh, I am out of this.
With honours in maths.
Totally. Well, my average is still about 50 because I needed a really high grade to get to the passing tip over it. But I get it. Yeah, honors in math. Yeah.
Excellent. So, finally graduated then. Did you go to prom or did you mug that off?
You know what? We didn't have so Canadian school. I don't know if we didn't have prom, but yeah, no, we didn't have prom.
Oh, not like Americans then that want to celebrate it all.
No, but we did have an after-grad party. And so I went to the after-grad party, and I do remember my day after the after-grad as much as I did the grad party. And I remember just thinking, you see, I didn't like school, so perhaps I should really enjoy the afterlife of the after school. But I'll tell you something, that first day of after school, I realized who was still in there. It was the judger and the critiquer, constantly being like, if you don't slay something today, you're a complete failure. So I remember I didn't have a job the first day and people weren't calling me fast enough so that I could go work. I remember thinking my life is going to be miserable. You see, now the real world sees who I actually am. See, I got to hide behind the walls of school, but now the world's really going to see who I am.
So where'd you go next?
Yeah.
What was in store for you after high school?
Yeah, high school. So I had several jobs, of which I got fired from, I think, all of them. My dad was a leader of this church organization. So I was raised in a home where, leadership. But I remember thinking, well, for me to have a job, I'm going to have to lead myself well. And often if it's very hard to work with yourself, what a human does is you learn to think that trying to manage or controlling other people might be a good thing to do. And so I wonder how much I owned my own responsibilities. I don't think I really did. And I was looking for relief constantly. So I wouldn't put it on my dad or anything like this, that he taught me this. But I remember just thinking, you see, my wound was, now let's see what the world's going to, the world's going to see that I'm really a fallacy now. And so I was constantly in defense. And never forget, there's my first job. I was a gas jockey pumping fuel. And the boss was just a jovial individual, right? That's a lovely person, actually. And, and he would get us all in for pizza every week. And he was a, bigger gentleman, and he'd eat like 3 large pizzas himself. And he would seriously. And so this guy was just was amazing. And so what he did the one day, I was running a transaction for a client, and then we were doing a grand reopening of his business. And he was just having fun. And so there's balloons behind the counter, and he takes one of the balloons, I guess, off of one of these sticks, and he pops it right behind me, and it spooked me. And him and the client were laughing, but I thought they were laughing at me. They weren't laughing at me. They were just having fun that I got spooked. I was so mad because I felt so threatened. You know what I mean? Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So it was just shock. And and that was one job that I decided to quit. So if I could tell that I wasn't comfortable and that I might create issue, then I would just take myself out. So this is the job that I just said. I looked at him and said, I quit. I can't believe you'd ever do it in front of a client. And he said to me, hey, I was just trying to have fun with you. And I said, no, you weren't. You were. Oh my goodness. So I quit, right? I quit.
So did you end up going, because did you get enough points to be able to go to college or did you?
So I got enough points to go to college. And so I went to college, or at least I was going to try. And I enrolled in some business courses. A couple of years after I graduated, I enrolled in some business classes and decided I want to get into business for myself. Why not? Okay. I've made such a mess out of my life, so why not volunteer for the business arena? No, anyway, I felt like I made a mess of my life. And so, of course, you go to school with that thing and going, I can't believe I'm doing this all over again. And I lasted 2 days. I got the textbooks, sat down in the class, and I remember thinking, you're such a loser. You could have done this 4 years ago, and you could have had a degree like some of your friends do already. And I remember just thinking to myself, what really needs to happen here? You do know some things, and maybe some things are to fight for your responsibilities instead of fighting for relief. Maybe you know that to question your worth constantly and think that anything is going to give you worth other than if you decide that you are just a person and that you start enjoying yourself like you did when you did that math exam and you just unfolded and you got a pretty good grade. Maybe now it's time to just activate life. So I left school, and I'll never forget, I started dating this little girl. I'm married to her now. Her name is Meg, and I've been with her for 27 years. I've got 2 boys, teenager, 17, 15. And never forget, I was dating her, and she was a cute little button. Like she's still that cute button in my life. She's 4'10" and 3/4. She's a small little, I call her the mini Meg, and she's my, mini of my life. And so speaking about, so I had largely, when I say conquered, I just learned when not to speak. So if I really doubted myself, then not speak, because that's when a lot of the stammering would come out. So I kind of trained myself away from that. And so I remember I was dating her and things were going really well. It was still entry stages of our relationship. I think it was a month or two in. And thinking things were going really well and thinking, you know what, this might just be the one. And I'm really feeling connected. And never forget standing in her parents' foyer. And she was standing about 3 steps higher than I. And so we're about the same height now. and all of a sudden I just had a moment of feeling like being myself, I guess. I mean, she was so relaxing. She was so peaceful and so energetic, and she had so much fire and excitement in her. Just a lovely little soul. And it just, oh, like I was so sheltered on the farm. And here's a girl that came from kind of like a messed up home. Dad's an alcoholic, but just all kinds of shit going down at their house. I'm like, this is awesome. This is different, right? And I remember standing there and chatting with her. And then all of a sudden, I found myself in a stutter pattern. And I'd done a little bit of that with her, but not too much. And I talked about it a little bit, but not much. But I couldn't stop. My ears got all red. And finally I stopped after about a minute trying to finish a sentence. And I said, I'm sorry, baby. And I remember thinking, I'm saying sorry because she's going to say it's over now. I said, I'm sorry. And I'm thinking, you know what? She now saw who I really was. I'm just a mess. She won't want to be with me. And she looked at me in that moment. I'll never forget it. She looked at me and she says, oh no, I know. I don't think you said a word. She goes, that's true. But she looked at me and she goes, I know exactly what you were saying. And I'll never forget, man, my tears started coming and they couldn't stop. They just started flowing and flowing. And I remember being, somebody gets this without me actually getting words out properly. What is this? Is it maybe true that my fear of saying everything perfectly doesn't need to be anymore? People actually do communicate with empathy. The first language that we have as humans, empathy. And is that, and anyway, it's just, oh my goodness. So yeah, when you ask about after high school, in the small community where we came from, in the Mennonite tradition, it was kind of like, are you going to get married and have kids? So I was 20. So I was 20 years old when I met her. And that's when, or 21, 22. And of course, some of my friends had graduated, from college already. And I tried college for a little bit of time. And then I met Meg. And I remember thinking to myself at that age, 21, 22, I'm not dating. And I bet you I'll just be left as a bachelor and as a loser for all my life. Like, to me, it's like get married fast, so that's what happened. So anyway, to make a long story short, I'm like, phew, I just scraped that one by. I think I got married at 25 or 26. And I feel like I just barely made it. But the truth is, now that I live on the West Coast, and of course I live a different life, there's no need for my Rowan, who's going to be turning 18 next year, for him to be like fearing not being with a spouse at 18 or finding someone, right? So, yeah.
So you got married then?
I did.
So what were you doing for work? She obviously understood you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess she must still understand you because she's still with you. So a couple of years later.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have been out on good behaviour by now.
Yeah.
So how did you go forward?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you couldn't go into farming because of your hay fever. I mean, that's not the greatest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you go? How did you get on with the first stages of marriage?
Mm-hmm. So we got married in the year 2000, and so that makes us married for 22 years now, together for 27. But Meg was a nurse's assistant or nurse aide or something, and so she was going to school to be a nurse, or she's contemplating doing that, taking the next step. And so I had decided that farming had decided for me that it wasn't for me. And so I'd taken up a position of being a delivery driver. And so I would drive, and on the farm I had my class 1 semi-truck driving license. So I drove truck. And so I drive across the border and I would haul livestock twice a week. I'd make 2 super long days out of the week. And so that was my position. And it allowed me the autonomy and freedom to think on my own and just develop some thinking and some compassionate thoughts towards, I guess, me and life in general, and just contemplate the greater tensions of life. And with the income that I was generating, with the income that she was making, we bought a little single family or single Yeah, it was a single bedroom house. So actually, it was 2-bedroom house, but really small. I think it was a 650 square foot house. And we got married. So proud. Went on a little honeymoon to New York. We stopped in at the Poconos, and then we went to New York. And we came back, and upon return, I got a little phone call from my boss. So the company who I drove truck for, and he just said, "Listen, there's no more." His words were, "There's no more loads for you. Like no more loads for you to haul." And I thought, this is devastating news. The day of return, I got mortgage obligation. My wife can't cover mortgage. I got no job. And actually, I remember sitting down with her and being like, and she already knew my story. Like I already shared with her the thanks that I'd had, that she could hold my stuttering and just be there with me and just live with me and just enjoy life. Like she just treated me like as an ordinary human. I'll never forget the gift that was for me. Well, my life, like I started being playful with my life at that point in time. Now all of a sudden it wasn't right or wrong. It was just playfulness. And so, but remember sitting there on the couch with her, contemplating what had just happened, that I got, there's no more loads apparently, and thinking, how am I going to do this? And there's something that she was always about, in that her in her home, because her environment was not even close to perfect. She just has this thing like nothing has to be perfect. Why does anything have to be perfect? Nothing has to be perfect. And so she I remember looking at her going, she doesn't seem concerned at all. I seem really worried. She doesn't seem concerned at all. And what's interesting is within that, I learned that nothing traps her. Everything actually frees her. She's like, wow, she crosses her legs and she goes, well, what kind of opportunities do we have now? She goes, and I'm thinking to myself, oh goodness, like, thank goodness that's for her. Like that was a quick reframe exactly when I needed it. And I said, honestly, baby, I've always wanted to do my own business. And I think maybe now's the time. And then she looked at me and she goes, yeah. But the only thing is, see, her mom has a fabric store, had a fabric, and still does actually own this fabric store. And she was a little bit resentful towards some of her parents' career choices, because that's, I think, how she could see that maybe they hadn't invested in her life a lot or properly. And so she's like, yeah, but a job, wouldn't a job be better though? And I'm like, yeah, but my history with jobs isn't that great. Like, let's be honest. And I don't want to put us in, like, I didn't get fired from this job, but I mean, from a lot of other ones, like I was really struggling with my self-worth for many years, to be honest. And I think I'm ready for that now too, but this could be an opportunity, baby. And I said, if I just work my tail off, and, I'm willing to do that. And anyway, we decided that I was going to start a custom home building company. I never built a house, nor was I going to, because I couldn't work with dust because of my allergies. And so she picked up extra shifts at her workplace, at her nursing place. That she was working at an old folks home at the time. She was the bath girl. She liked to just help people get clean and bathe and help them with those things, and just a servant of heart. And so I went about, I had about 8 months before our income or our bank account was drawn to zero. And so I hustled. And my idea, firstly, was to sell homes into our local market, like build on site. The only thing is, it seemed like a challenge that wouldn't garner proper profits. Yet at the same time, it also wasn't a large enough challenge. I like to challenge myself to something greater. Like I taught myself to think differently, to talk differently. So I'm like, I'm not for any challenge. And so I decided, why not sell product? Why not sell custom homes into markets? So first they sell them where we lived, which is in the Altona Winkler area. So build them and sell them there, but then move them into areas where the profit margins were higher. So at the time, the U.S. exchange rate was massively in favor for U.S. citizens to come over. There, the dollar was worth 40% more than the Canadian. And so we decided to start a ready-to-move home company that was more than just like trailers. They were like 37 feet wide by 100 feet long, massive houses, really customized. And so I'll never forget, I went to talk to trade partners in our area and architects and different people that I was building a team with. And most of them just laughed me out of the office. They're like, you've never done this before. And so what has you think you can do this? And on and on. And I was hearing all of their doubts. It's a little bit like me hearing all of my doubts of myself when I was a kid. And I remember thinking, wow, yeah, no, it's true. But thinking, you know what, all I have to, like, I don't need to know exactly how to build the house myself, or how to even do certain things, but I just need to know how to put a team of people together. And I thought, I remember I can do this, but how will I? And I remember just coming to a place I'll never forget. So my wife was at work, and It was running at about 6.5 months in. And so keep in mind, again, I was saying at 8 months, I could see our bank account would be drawn down to zero. And I was doing reconciliation, just mapping out. And sure enough, I had about a month and a bit left. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like here I am. We're living in a small 675 square foot house. We're using this as our office. So when people come up, and we had Army generals sometimes, like to your, like these people of prestige who come up, and I remember thinking they're probably looking for some fancy place, and here they're coming to a small little house, walking into a tiny home with a tiny little bedroom, and that's where I had an office desk I'd have the chairs that they would sit in. I'd taken out the closet door, so they'd sit in the closet and face the table, and that's where I was sitting. And I'm thinking to myself, this is all just going to go to ruin. But thinking, well, no, there's a chance. And I had the builders who I'd finally, some people did align with me and said, you know what, if anyone can make it happen, I think you can. You're an unknown in the area in business, but it seems like you have a passion for it. So, and I had these teammates around me. Some of these people had built homes. So we used their homes as a showpiece when people came up to see our house. I'll never forget, I'm sitting there. So back to the story, I'm sitting on the sofa, my wife's at work, and I'm doing reconciliation with numbers and thinking to myself, okay, you know what, honestly, you're running tight, James. How are you going to do this? Because you're not going to be the one that's going to have these fumes exhaust, and then you won't have enough money. This just won't happen. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, what's the roadblock? I seem to have people who want my houses. When people come up, a lot of them ask me questions, and my answer constantly was, my dad always told me, in life, if you don't know, you don't shovel. You just say the truth. So what I didn't know, I'd say, I don't know, yet I'll get back to you with an answer. I had one client that I had found that had come as an Army sergeant down from Minneapolis area. And he said, actually, you know, you're the only one that we keep coming back to, because you're the only one that seems to be honest. Like, you seem to say when you don't know something, you say it. And even though we ask, and most of the things we ask, you don't know, you always get back to us with the answer. So you just seem honest. And so here's the thing, right? I'm thinking this might be the deal. This might be the client that might just get me going. The only thing is, I'm having this issue with money, meaning the banks won't borrow me anything. My parents didn't have money to fund anything. And I was an unknown in business. So of course I can't really leverage anything. And I had a small little house in which I had a mortgage, so I can't leverage that. So thinking, how am I going to, I'm thinking to myself, what am I thinking anyway? How am I going to build houses if I don't have the money? And I remember thinking, what were you thinking when you started this whole thing? And all I remember thinking is that will work itself out. So here's to the play on it. I remember, just like back to my story, when I was sitting on the bed thinking about my math exam Sunday, a couple hours left before the exam, I had to do something. D-Day was now. What was going to come for me? Let's see. And what I came to is, this whole project, my dream to start my own business is all going to die really quickly if I don't shift the narrative. And I remember thinking, what's the narrative? What's holding me back? And I thought, well, money. And I thought, well, what happens if I could do business without money? And I thought, no, that's a silly question. I'm like, James, you've asked other silly questions. Why not just go there for a while? And I remember asking, so what about money could you do different? So if it's true that both are true, you need money, but maybe your problem that you have with money, you could mature that problem by you just sitting with this issue for a bit and seeing, what is this? And all of a sudden the thought on timing came to play. What happens if I time when I need the money? So instead of waiting for the money at the end, meaning instead of me having to build and fund the project myself right from the start to the end, what happens if I would just front load heavy on the initial payment? So before I begin, it was prepayment. So make a long story short, I adjusted, I put that into the metric. And I kid you not, Tim, this is no tale short of just the truth of what it was. On the day of it, and back then I kind of made these deals with God. I don't know what I was doing, but I made these deals with God, right? So whatever that even means. But the deal with God that I made was this: Lord, I said back in the day, I said, if you want this to work, I'm not going to look for a job or be worried about it at all. I'm not going to put concern to it until not the week before I run out of income, but I will wait until the Monday after it expires. It was a Friday afternoon. Chris calls me and says, James, we're on the way to Winkler, Altona area. We want to come see you. And I thought, oh, they're probably coming because they looked at some other builders in the area, and they're probably coming to tell me, because they're gracious people, we're going to go with those people. It happened before. It's going to happen all over again. They pulled up And they already knew my term. That sent them the contract. They want to do this. They pulled up, they opened the window, and I thought, here's the news. It's going to come. Here it is. Meaning, sorry, you're a nice guy, but there's no houses on the lot. You say you do this, but there's no proof of anything other than the one show home that we walked through that your builders built, but you haven't even done that. And Chris reaches out the window and says, James. And he's holding a piece of paper. And I thought, what is this? And he gave it to me as a check for $76,000.
Well,
and my friend, that paid for me to start building their house. And to make a long story short, that's how our life started. It started with me thinking, you know what? Here I am screwing it up again. And then she comes along and she's like, actually, it's an opportunity. She said, I don't know about business, or yeah, because my mom has. How about a job? And I said, honey, just trust me on this. And I'll be honest, those months of working hard to get my business going, I actually did pull a part-time job where I get up at 3:00 in the morning and I work for my brother-in-law from 3:00 to 8:00. And I just changed mobile signs. These little signs that have these neon letters, I would change those mobile signs and I'd build signs for him. And by 8:00, I had made enough so that I could fuel my marketing because I hadn't thought of the marketing money I needed. I had 8 months of money capital saved up, but not for marketing. So those hours were all put towards marketing.
So that's what you got you going then. So first client, $76,000.
Mm-hmm.
How did it go? Did it work?
Okay. So that's a good question. I ran that business for
deliver.
I delivered, and I'll never forget. I went from having no houses on the lot, so I leased a lot. I went to having no houses, nobody knew me in the area for business, to being invited to these dinners, and I was sitting at these tables with these prominent leaders in our area. They didn't know who I was, and they would talk about Jada Homes. I was the owner of Jada Homes, but they didn't know it was me. And so I went from having no houses on our lot to having like 11 houses. They're all lined up, all pre-built. And they're saying, who is this person? Like, where do they get their funding from? And they would talk about these things. I'll never forget my brother-in-law. He said to me, so when I had my first $1 million in the bank account, keep in mind, it was $1 million. These $1 million were towards funding the projects. It wasn't profit. It was towards funding. So I could have blown it all, but I was taught to be responsible. And so I never bought myself stuff. I never, I made sure all my vendors were paid first before I realized any profits. So I delivered, and my people were honestly tickled pink. Like, we moved houses, like it costs our company roughly $50,000 to $100,000 to move a house because we had to shut down roads and police escorts would drive, and we'd have these big houses. And oh my goodness, did I deliver? I'll tell you what I delivered. Great income, money like I'd never seen before. I think I made myself proud, but really I was trying to prove to my dad that I was worthy of making money because I could do it. I could see what I was doing now.
Yeah.
But I also delivered on the fact that did I give myself an experience? Like, I went from living in this small house to building. So after I had sold these houses and I realized what kind of profit, I built myself a brand new show home in town. And they just called it like the White House in town because it's one of the best houses in town. And I wanted to build it really nice so I could use it to sell other houses from. I bought new vehicles. I bought my dad a restored 1949 pickup. Thought I had it made in the shade. You know how it is when you think you have it made in the shade. You think you have it made until it all of a sudden comes falling down. So that day also did come. So.
So what was your downfall?
Well, I think I realized all over again that proving it to anyone, actually a little bit like proving to myself, might be a bit of a waste of time. Because when the US exchange plummeted, I had no market. Honestly, it was a bit of my exit strategy. I kind of did have it mapped out, thinking, my wife, she wasn't too beholden to having like permanent infrastructure. So we leased land, we built an office, but we built it like a house. So we sold it like a house later on. And when the market shifted, so my exit strategy, I was sitting on a pile of dough, to be honest. I was good. The only thing is my pivot was really awkward. And I remember those voices coming back on, here I am, I've proved myself that financially I could do it. Because my dad didn't have money. And so our parents always demanded that we're good, kind, responsible people. But it seemed like they desired also money. And so they say that children will more so model the desire over demand. It's what a child will do. So if you say to the child, don't do this, but you're laughing when it happens, well, the child sees you like laughing more than your demand. So I firstly proved it to myself, but also, I guess, to my parents, that I had achieved. And my dad was a pastor of a church, never made money from being a pastor. He was a volunteer, but he gave all his life and had a farm. And I kind of managed the farm. I was the only boy and 4 sisters. And from a young age, I was managing the farm. So I had proved to myself that you can have both. You can help people, like my dad did, and you can have a lot of money. And unfortunately, though, I began to realize that this whole structure, how I built my life, even though I wasn't braggadocious about it, I realized that proving anything to anyone, including myself, was short-term fix. Because who was in there had always been in there. So I fell into a million pieces. I checked out of life for 2.5 years. Almost lost the business, almost lost my investments, almost lost my wife and kids. I had Rowan and Harrison at the time. They were already born. But Harrison, my youngest, had high functioning autism. So he was diagnosed with high functioning autism. I'll never forget, I fell to a million pieces because here I was, our family was treating him. So Meg, me, Rowan, but Meg is very much kind of person like, you don't have to change for anyone. Like, we wrap around how you are, Harrison. He was just a young little baby at the time, but you could see he was different. And I remember thinking, gee, this is interesting. This kid gets the gift of just being different. I wish I would have had that gift when I was a kid, I'm thinking. But then I did some reconciliation. I thought, well, actually, my parents are very loving. They are very generous people. So who is stopping the gift? And again, it came back to, and you'll hear in my whole narration, it's constantly me judging and blaming myself. And my friend, it was just so much to handle, thinking that I may have wasted most of my life. And again, I'm being harsh on myself, but I've done life thinking that maybe people have been giving me permission to exist wherever I go, but I'm the one that's holding this whole thing back. And so I remember thinking I could heal myself away from these thoughts by thinking of it more. But the more I thought of it, the more of a recluse I became. So much to like the point I would sleep 18 hours a day. I would hide out in the bedroom, lived in a new house, sold off our vehicles except for one. And never forget, my wife comes, it was about 1.75 years in. I hadn't seen my family because everything was so nerve-wracking for me. Like, everything was like pressure for me. Like, I'm not performing. And I think I realized that I had been performing life instead of living life. And any of the supports that I had around me were actually all crumbling now. This whole thing was built on toothpicks.
So was this after the US crash in 2008, was it?
Yeah.
So that yeah, so you were feeling the effects of the crash in America, where you built this business up on American money, I guess, and when their market sort of dried, it sent you into a bit of a spiral with no way forward. So you also went into a deep depression. What was the catalyst that brought you out of it?
I think I became satiated. I know I became satiated. I became very done with hoping and praying it was going to get better. And I'm just tapping back into some of your great questions you've been laying down here. But a lot of what's coming to me is a reactivation in that moment, the catalyst being what has been your saving grace in all things? Was it when you took lengthy pause, or was it when you finally were about the work saying, what can I do about this now? How quickly can tables turn? And I say that now. I didn't ask myself that then, but I was so sick of it and so miserable and feeling so depleted and so wrecked, feeling anything but like the man who I had always thought that I would be in a time like this. Seeing my wife literally volunteer to do childcare for other kids, to support a grocery list of items that we needed throughout the week. These were areas that made me go, holy shit, what is going on here? I remember being like, yeah, but it's not fair. It's not how I prefer it. I remember being like, if I'm smart, I'm going to be picking up that life owes me nothing. As a matter of fact, it seems like we all have to make choices. And I remember instead of waiting for things to get better, I started participating with creating and designing my life. I think just absolute, to your point, absolute. The exhaustion led toward, instead of being like exhaustion where there's nothing left, I exhausted the fumes in the tank. And then all of a sudden exhaustion still came. And I contemplated taking my life, but I never did. What I would do is I would sedate myself with gravel and melatonin so I could just sleep away my day. That's what I would do. I just keep popping these things, pills and pills and pills. So I tried to exit, but I didn't really want to exit until all of a sudden I realized that I'm still exhausted, and the narration changed from exhausted because of something to now being exhausted towards what? And I took exhaustion and I moved it towards something. And I just said, I got to do something. I got to do something. And what I actually did is, you have to remember that I had become a business person. I'd been known for that in the area. My wife says, listen, you got your class. You still have your class ones, baby. Why don't you just hop in a truck and drive? And I thought, me drive truck? I'm not a trucker. And she encouraged me, just like she did earlier, as an opportunity. What is it? And I got my ass out of bed. And my friend, I got behind the wheel of a big rig and I became a long distance trucker for about 2 months, and I got my head screwed on straight. And I'll tell you something, I pulled over at rest areas, at truck stops. People looked at me. They're like, hey, what are you doing here? Because I mean, I don't dress like a trucker. I don't talk like a trucker. I'm not. And there is no trying to label these people, but I just wasn't that. Yeah.
Because done a little bit of truck driving myself, and it's a lonely old road on you, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
I've driven all over Europe. I worked for a Norwegian for a couple of years on a line truck from Oslo to Paris. You was either driving, eating, or sleeping. We were swindling the swindle sheets all the time, just to. I mean, he used to pay us at that time £1,000 a trip. So you'd push to do 2 trips in a week. So you were earning £2,000 in a week. But we were breaking every law that you could imagine.
Wow.
For the tachographs and everything like that. But
yeah.
I mean, we got away with it most of the time.
Likewise. Yeah.
I got captured once, and that was his fault.
Of course, right?
Yeah. Well, we used to occasionally it'd give us a bit of a break from the line truck, and we'd pick up another trip to take from Oslo down to Toulon and Marseille, and then you come back and reload in Avignon, and then you just drive straight up from Avignon, get in on a Sunday night, drive round to, once you're cleared, round to this factory, And this factory used to run 24/7, 365. Like you bop your truck on one bay, your hanger on the other bay, give them the papers, get your head down, and they'll tip it during the night, and the factory kept running. And we always used to ring him when we cleared customs in Avignon and let him know what we got. And we used to load it up with 76 Euro pallets, was a full load. So double deck. So I rang him up. I said, I've only got 72 pallets on, but I'm all cleared and I'm on my way. Oh, he says, can you nip into Ridderkerk on the way back? Now, Ridderkerk is like in Holland. We don't go anywhere near. I said, I don't go anywhere near, because we had an office in Holland. I said, I don't go anywhere near there. He said, yes, I have a pallet that we've got to get up here. I said, you're taking liberties. I said, that's 15 hours drive for me. I've been working all day. I said, I'm going to get my head down after midnight. No, please, do what you can. So anyway, I set off. I said to him, you pay the fine if I get captured? Yes, I pay. Okay, I said, I'll do my best. I set off. I stopped off in Luxembourg, fill up with diesel on the way through. As I'm coming into Ridderkerk on a Saturday morning, the old Nick and the got pulled over by the old Bill and the Dutch ministry. So they pulled me up, papers, driving license, all the rest of it. And just as he's about to get out of the cab, he said, disc. I said, you don't want to see that? He said, yes, I do. I said, no, you don't. He said, disc. So took out my disc. He's looked at it and his mate stood down there. You've done this? I said, yeah. He says, you must pay. And he shows mate, he must pay. 6,000 guilders on the spot.
Wow.
I said, do you take DKV, which is his card? So yeah, we take D. So not only have they stung us for 6,000 guilders, which is about $3,000.
Wow. Wow.
They've taken my keys off me and parked me up for 8 hours. So I've rung him up. I said, there's a problem. He says, no. I said, yes. I said, I've been captured. He said, no. I said, yes. I said, it's worse than that. He said, no. I said, yes. They charged you 6,000 guilders. No. I said, it gets worse. He said, no. I said, yes. I said, they parked me up for 8 hours as well. No. Oh, this is terrible. I said, well, when they come back with my keys, I'll nip round the yard and see what we can do. So 10 o'clock at night, they've come round, they give me my keys back. I've gone round to the yard. This pallet weighing 4 ton, one pallet, 4 ton, they've stuck right on the back of my hanger, right on the back of my trailer.
Wow.
And it's made the drive really awkward because it's throwing my arse about on a wagon and drag.
Yeah.
So I've rung him up. I said, right, I've got a pallet on the back. This is about 11 o'clock at night. Bearing in mind that you're not allowed to drive in Germany after 10 o'clock on a Saturday night.
Wow.
And he said, you must try and get through. All right, I'll do my best. But if I get captured, will you pay the fine? Yes, I pay, he says. So I've set off and I've got to the Dutch-German border, and I'm just sneaking through this place called Camp where we used to go. And just as I'm getting through into the German side, this light popped up, this lollipop, and it's the old Bill there. And he says, where are you going? I said, I'm just going to go over there and park up till tomorrow night. He said, no, you're not. He says, you're going to turn around and go back into Ireland and then come through tomorrow night. Okay. Oh, by the way, you must pay another 100 marks.
Wow.
So I've rung him up about 3 o'clock in the morning. Hello. He says, I said, there's a problem. No. I said, yes. I said, I've been captured. No. I said, yes. I said, it gets worse. They charged me 100 marks to do it. And they parked me up until tomorrow night. No. Because we're supposed to be at this factory at sort of
Yeah.
we normally get into this factory sort of 1,
Yeah,
2
yeah.
o'clock
Yeah.
on the Monday morning.
Yeah.
And I said, there's no chance I'm going to get there now. I'll tell him you're broken down. I said, don't tell him that. I'll tell him the truth. No, I said, yes. So anyway, finally got through.
Yeah.
Finally got over into,
Yeah.
got back into Norway.
Uh-huh.
Drove round the factory 24 hours late. And it's normal. This place is lit up like a Christmas tree. And I've driven in and it's like almost pitch black at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I parked the truck on the bay and dropped the hanger on the bay. They come at 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh, he said you've broken down. We've had to close the factory down. We've had to switch everything off, run out of product. Oh, I said, yeah, he stuck another load on the back. Did he? We nearly lost the contract.
Wow.
They weren't happy with him. He wasn't overly happy with me either for telling them.
Wow. That's amazing story. Holy smokes.
But yeah, that was working for a Norwegian.
Wow.
That was fun. That was driving trucks.
That's very interesting. Holy smokes. Great story.
Yeah. It was funny at the time, but it's even funnier now when I tell it. So, how are we doing then? So, where did we get up to? You had a couple of months driving a truck, got your head straight.
Got my head straight, and then while I was getting my head straight, I remember thinking, so what is this all for? And again, is this so that I can eliminate that, things that apparently I'm the problem again, or what is this for? What is it for? And there's something that came to my state of being, which is gratitude. So I went to this one seminar, ended up being a Tony Robbins seminar. I'll never forget walking into the seminar, and this was relationship day. So it was at a Date with Destiny seminar. It's a 6-day event, and it was relationship day. And I walked into the room that day, and he was doing an intervention with some people over there up front in the corner somewhere. And I was walking in the back and trying to sneak my way into my group, but I could see our color group is sitting kind of in the middle on the other side. So I'm trying to sneak along the wall, and all of a sudden I hear him just turn around from what he was doing. He must have, whether he saw me or not, but it ended up being exactly what I needed. He turns around and he says, "Depression is the most selfish thing you could ever do." And he just spits it, just keeps going about how it's like you're just asking, you're taking, you're not just going hard. And I'm sitting here going, does this guy even know like my life? Like, holy smokes. And anyway, so he just walks directly to like the aisle right close to where I was. And I had sat down and we ended up doing some group work. And so, of course, for me, group work was a little easier already because I've been with Meg for a while. And, I realized to associate with people, of course, isn't so scary. And so the only thing is, I feel like everyone is moving ahead in life and I'm not. So I just stay seated and I feel frozen in the moment, completely frozen. And everyone's doing group work and they're saying, "Hey, you want to come join us?" I'm like, "No." And I'm just feeling, I guess, these old demons like, "Hey, apparently I once didn't do group work and I feel like a complete loser. And here I sit and look at this. I'm a failure," on and on. And all of a sudden in the moment being like, you know what? I'm looking around here and everybody seems to have their own challenges because I know all these people. I've got to know them the last couple of days. I know them. They all got struggles. And the thing is, the way that they tool into life, that when they lose in life, they're not spooked. It isn't just that they have to win in life, but how they handle the losses in their life is so interesting. Meaning they're grateful for it all. And what fascinated me is they weren't changing the facts. They could hold the facts. They're losing like X. They weren't changing. They weren't turning it into hyperbole. It wasn't making it positive. It's like you've served active duty. You've lost some service. You've lost friends probably to war. Sure, right? And so for me, it was like, hey, I lost so much. And so, of course, the focus is like, hey, listen, does life owe me something or does it owe me nothing? And if it owes me nothing, I'm looking around here thinking to myself, these people seem like they're just in a state of gratitude. So that day I decided that gratitude, because Tony said, and I believed him, he said, you cannot live, you cannot coexist suffering and whatever it is, depression and something, anxiety, they don't coexist with gratitude. If you're in a state of gratitude, it doesn't exist. And so self-help, I've tapped into, but it's a very unself-helpy. It isn't a positive thinking my way bullshit to something great. It's to wrestle with the tensions and seeing even how, Tony, even when I work with military people, how, we get to, if we be about the work, take and listen to people's stories like you're doing here. And it's like observing that, in life, sometimes a human thinks I win when this happens. And when my preferences aren't met, then apparently it's a bad thing. And now it's a loss. And apparently I seek to eliminate that. Instead of being about that, why not choose to integrate? And so at that event, gratitude was the thing. And so many stories I can share with you. We're just going to run out of time. Perhaps I'll have to have you on my show and I can ask some questions that I can bring up a story or two. But I'll just be honest. I haven't lost a day of joy in my life. I've developed this, and this is no hyperbole, but I kid you not, I have an unshakable love with life. The time that I thought I lost was 2.5 years when I checked out of life. My kids were young. I remember thinking I've really fucked it up. Like I've really, pardon the language, but I really effed it up. Like my kids are going to be like their dad. They'll figure that those instrumental years are gone. I mean, whatever. It's fearing, like I did earlier, that at a young age, perhaps everything will be taken away. When I was, not getting married at a super young age, but still, at 2.5 years, was wiped out. I wasn't existent in my kid's life at all, sleeping my ass away constantly. But just like what happened when I came out of that story, I just call it my journey. My kids, they latched onto me, and actually, I've developed so quickly. How quickly it was almost like what was needed is that I finally got to see myself so that they could finally have the relationship with a dad that they could be authentic with. And instead of me teaching them everything, they would teach me. And so it was both ways. So the master, the teacher showing up in the same time. And so wins and losses. So when I think about what did this all create, it moved me through my journey and through my story. And so to be honest, I sold off all of the business movements I had with Jada Homes. So all of that custom home building, I sold all of that, all the infrastructure, any buildings I had in offices, corporate buildings. And I just became, my wife said one day, I'll never forget, she's so cute. She said after a meeting that didn't go very well, and she found the moment, like the catalyst moment, you poked at that before, the catalyst. She found the catalyst, and we left the meeting, and she could see I wasn't too excited about what was happening in the company. And, some of these challenges I've dealt with them before, and just boring stuff. And we walked home that day, and she said to me, hey, James, why don't you just become a dude? Like, what does that mean? Become a dude. And she goes, what happens if you'd sell off all of your business interests in Jada and you just became a property investor? We bought some strategic property along the coastal lines. So I have investments now on the West Coast primarily, and I used to have some in Phoenix. I just sold all those. But you just become a dude, and you just work with your passion. You work with humans who are hungry, active in their own rescue, people who want to learn what actually it looks like to take the wins and losses of our life and ensure that we're not walking past 50% of them. And the way that looks is most people, they don't have a muscle built towards learning what it would take to actually, when there's a loss that comes, instead of appointing that as being a bad thing and that I got to try to eliminate this, but learn to utilize it for the good that it is and be grateful and see disguised in that the heart of a loss is a gift if we're courageous enough and if we utilize and if we choose to be responsible for. So my life now is dedicated to the space. So I'm a one-on-one coach, and I run a no charge weekly wins and losses community call where anybody can show up and tap into the call. And the call is really just about a safe place where people share a win and a loss if they choose. And if not, you can just observe. And when you observe, my goodness, Tim, you should see the look on people's faces when they realize in real time that there's no need for us to convert the loss into a positive, but just to express it and realize it is, accept the fact as it is. Be willing to say, my comrade died, for example. He's dead. If you don't see it as it is, you'll never see clearly what could be. And so first nugget is see it clearly as is. And then, so not be anxiously trying to wrestle this thing to a positive and trying to change the facts. Keep it at the fact. He died. A bullet went to the head. It's unfortunate. Here he lies. Let's bury him. You told me a story earlier. You had this backdrop of this church and this cemetery. And so your story, right? Some of your friends have gone on. and they're not here to
Absolutely.
share story like you are, right? And so it is, instead of trying to change the narrative, to actually deal with a wound when it happens and be like, it sucks, but instead of being it's bad and I deserve this and I'm not progressing fast enough, because that's often the problem. Like COVID, they say the primary thing with this whole COVID epidemic is society has decided that we're not progressing fast enough, and that's where the anxiety comes from. And so to realize that we're progressing about exactly the way we need to, if we choose to participate with what's directly in front of us. Win, lose, or draw, whatever comes was designed. The bullet came your friend's way, not your way. Okay, that's how it went. Instead of saying why, what for? Let it be that it falls on some responsible shoulders, like you and your listeners, whoever is choosing to participate, and say, what can I do about this for? If you're overwhelmed, what for? What towards? If you're exhausted, what for? What towards? So that's kind of what I've given my life to, is being in the space.
Brilliant. So that kind of brings us right up to date then.
It brings us up to date. And the thing I still struggle with, because sometimes people want to know, what is this? And I've got it written down. Then I focus on this. This is at the undertow. So here, I'm just going to read it. And this is my insecurity in life today, and I still struggle here. Can I trust that how I choose to show up each day, is this really the exact proper and good place for me to be? And number two, it's kind of in line with that, but how do I actually know that what I'm choosing to be and show up as now is most beneficial to humans? So I've just given my life to making sure that I don't do this. Yeah, I do this for us, is what I do it for. But to some degree, that at the core of my struggle is perhaps at the beginning. I have learned that I'm not walking from tensions, because life is tension. It is not good or bad. It is all, it all belongs.
Yeah.
And so to be there, so I have 4 things that I do my life about. I'll just say real quickly, Tim, the 4 things are: life owes me nothing. I said that earlier. Nothing has to be perfect. Everything is a co-creation. And showing up in state. So just showing up in the state that I show up in a joyful, grateful way is my way of saying thank you. So just showing up is my way of saying thank you to life. Life is so generous of me, offers me so many opportunities. And fourthly, nothing traps me, everything frees me. So those are kind of my philosophies that I live by.
Well, I can give you one more. And it's about worry, because lots of people worry themselves sick. Now, my philosophy on worry is that if you can't do anything about something, it's pointless worrying about it.
True.
If you can do something about it, there's no point in worrying about it, because you can deal with it. You can do something with it. And that's the way I look at worry. So I don't worry.
Good job. Good job.
And
good job.
And I don't even worry about when I go to bed whether I'm going to wake up in the morning, because I'll either wake up or I won't. There's no point in worrying about it.
So either it'll happen or it won't, right?
Absolutely. So it'll happen one way or the other. I'll wake up and be fine, or I'll wake up and I'm still laying there dead.
Tim, words of wisdom.
There's no point in worrying about it, because it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I like it. It'll happen anyway. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Life will just happen. And it seems like I got a little acronym, and it's just RAJ. It's resist less. And the A stands for accept more. And the J stands for choose to be non-judgmental. So it's like this place of, life is going to happen. Life cares less. Life loves us too much to care. It loves us. It says, listen, it'll happen. Can you harmonize with nature? Can you do that? Because that's your job, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what you do, life will carry on.
Yeah. Wow.
And when you're gone, it'll carry on.
I can't wait to hear your story.
That,
Sometime we'll have to link up and you'll be on my show. I can't wait to hear your story,
Absolutely.
because you will have very viscerally when you say life will carry on, it will. You have gone through many experiences where the physicality of the being is gone. And that's a big one to take.
We can talk about that, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, James, thank you so much for sharing your life and your struggles.
Well, thank you for being, firstly, being a great facilitator. I love your questions. And to be honest, I never thought this would bring up so many feels for me. And so thanks for the journey. I had a great time, and actually it helped me just to see why I do what I do and to see patterns. And so I hope for the listeners it helped them in any which way. And Tim, I hope for you that you appreciated it, brought some new feels to you, because let's be honest, we all want to have a good new experience. And so, hey, I hope that we enjoyed our time. I certainly did. So thanks for your gracious presence. It was so nice.
No, thank you so much.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.